The stars burned cold and distant through the observation window of the mining station. Jacob Hayes stood alone in the dark room watching the space where Earth used to be. 3 months had passed since the Xanther Empire came. 3 months since everything ended. He remembered the first day clearly. The alarms had screamed through every human colony at once. Giant ships appeared in the sky. Ships so large they blocked out the sun. The Xanther didn't negotiate. They didn't offer terms. They simply began firing. Earth died first. The planet that gave birth to humanity burned under weapons that turned cities into glass. 30 billion people gone in hours. The colonies fell next, one after another. Mars went silent. Europa stopped transmitting. The farming worlds in the outer systems sent desperate messages that cut off mid-sentence. Jacob and the 300 people on mining station Persephone's Gate could only watch and listen as their species was erased from existence. They were too far out, too small to matter. The Xanther ignored them like a man ignores dust. When it ended, the Xanther broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity had been eliminated. The human threat was gone. Their worlds were now property of the Empire. Any species that helped surviving humans would face the same fate. The message played on loop for a week, then stopped. The universe moved on. Katie Morris found Jacob in the observation room. She was the station's head engineer, a woman who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. Now she looked tired, broken. They all did. She sat down next to him without speaking. They had become good at silence. Words felt empty now. "We have 2 years," she finally said. "Maybe less. The recycling systems are failing. We don't have parts to fix them properly." Jacob nodded slowly. 2 years to live on a forgotten mining station, watching empty space. 2 years until the air went bad or the water stopped flowing. 2 years to be the last humans in the galaxy. "There has to be something we can do," Katie said, but her voice held no hope. "We can't just wait here to die." Jacob had been thinking about this for weeks. He had been an intelligence officer before taking this assignment. He studied alien civilizations, their cultures, their military structures. He knew the Xanther better than almost any human. And he knew something important. The Xanther kept records. They documented everything. And they had laws, ancient laws that even their empire followed. "The right of answer," Jacob said quietly. Katie looked at him with confusion. "What?" "It's an old Xanther law. When they eliminate a species, one member of that species can demand to speak before the Supreme Arbiter. It's tradition, something from thousands of years ago. Most Xanther don't even remember it exists. So what? Even if that's true, how does it help us?" Jacob turned to face her. "They declared humanity extinct. They told the galaxy we're gone. But we're not. I'm not. If I walk into their throne room and invoke that law, they have to let me speak. Their entire culture is built on law and tradition. They can't refuse." Katie stared at him like he had lost his mind. "Jacob, they'll kill you the second they see you. You can't just walk into the capital of the empire that destroyed us and expect them to follow some ancient law." "Yes, I can," Jacob said, "because that's exactly what they'll do. The Xanther believe they're superior because they follow the law. They think other species are animals because we break rules. If I invoke the right of answer in public, in front of their people, they can't refuse without admitting their laws don't matter. Their whole identity is built on being better than everyone else. And then what? You give a speech and they kill you anyway? What does that accomplish?" Jacob looked back out at the stars. "Someone needs to stand in front of them and say that we existed, that we mattered. That 30 billion people didn't just disappear without anyone caring. Even if it changes nothing, even if I die the second I finish speaking, someone needs to say it." Katie was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, "How would you even get there?" "We have mining shuttles. They barely work in the asteroid belt. The Xanther homeworld is 4 months away at faster than light speed. We don't have ships that can do that. But we have parts," Jacob said. "We have the station's sensor array. We have 3 shuttles. We have you." She understood what he was asking. Her face showed the calculation, the engineer's mind running through possibilities. "I would have to strip the entire station, take apart systems we need to survive, and even then the ship would be barely functional. You might not make it." "If you can build it, I'll fly it," Jacob said. Katie stood up and walked to the window. She put her hand against the cold glass, looking at the emptiness where their world used to be. "This is insane. You know that, right?" "This is the most insane thing I've ever heard." "I know. You'll die. Probably before you even reach their planet. Probably. And even if you make it, even if they let you speak, it won't bring anyone back. It won't change anything. I know that too. She turned to look at him. Tears ran down her face. The first tears he had seen from her since Earth died. When do we start? The next 6 weeks became a blur of work. Katie pulled apart the station piece by piece, taking everything that wasn't essential to immediate survival. Other people helped. Peter Cole, the station doctor, argued that Jacob was throwing his life away, but he still helped modify the shuttle's life support for long-term use. Deputy Commander Lisa Grant thought they should stay hidden, survive in silence, but she still provided security codes and intelligence data for Jacob to study. The shuttle that emerged barely looked like a ship. It was welded together from 3 different vessels, its faster-than-light drive built from salvaged sensor equipment and hope. Katie ran the calculations 6 times. The ship had a 60% chance of making the journey. Maybe. On the morning of departure, everyone gathered in the docking bay. 300 people, the last humans in the universe as far as they knew. Children held their parents' hands. Old miners who had spent 50 years in space stood silent. They all watched as Jacob loaded supplies into the ship. He wore his old military uniform, cleaned and repaired. If he was going to speak for humanity, he would look like someone worth listening to. Lisa Grant handed him a data chip containing everything they knew about the Xanthir. Katie gave him a detailed map of their homeworld. Peter gave him enough medical supplies for the journey and a sedative in case the pain got too bad. "Come back," Katie said, though they both knew he wouldn't. "Take care of them," Jacob replied. He climbed into the shuttle. The door sealed behind him. The engines powered up with a sound like thunder in the small bay. The ship lifted off, turned, and shot out into space. 300 people watched until it disappeared into the dark. Jacob was alone now, truly alone. The ship's computer displayed the route to Xanthir Prime. 4 months of travel through empty space. 4 months to prepare his words. 4 months to become the voice of a dead species. He set the course and activated the faster-than-light drive. The stars stretched into lines. The journey began. The first week was the hardest. Jacob had trained for space travel, had spent years on stations and ships, but nothing prepared him for true isolation. The shuttle was barely 10 meters long. He could cross it in 5 steps. The only sound was the hum of life support and the quiet beeping of the navigation computer. No other voices. No other heartbeats. Just him and the vast empty dark. He established a routine on day 8. Wake at 700-hour station time. Exercise for 1 hour in the cramped space, pushing his body to stay strong. Eat a protein bar that tasted like cardboard. Study the Xanthir language for 3 hours. The data chip Lisa gave him contained everything humanity knew about their destroyers. Their culture, their history, their laws. Jacob memorized it all. The Xanthir Empire was old, far older than human civilization. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still hunting with stone tools. Their empire covered 47 different species, all of them conquered and controlled. The Xanthir believed in order above all else. They had laws for everything. How to speak, how to stand, how to address superiors. Their entire society was built on structure and hierarchy. At the top sat the Supreme Arbiter, a ruler chosen from the oldest bloodline. The current Arbiter was named Kathira, and she had ruled for 70 years. Below her were the High Council, military commanders and governors who controlled different parts of the empire. And below them were the conquered species, kept in line through fear and overwhelming force. Jacob studied the Supreme Arbiter most carefully. Kathira was known for following law exactly. She never broke tradition. She was cold, calculating, but fair by Xanthir standards. If Jacob could invoke the right of answer properly, if he could do it in a way that followed their rules perfectly, she would have to listen. Her own nature would force her to honor the ancient law. On day 23, the faster-than-light drive failed for the first time. Jacob was sleeping when the alarm screamed. He woke to red lights and the ship shaking like it was being torn apart. The drive was overheating, pushing beyond what the salvaged parts could handle. He threw on his pressure suit and went outside. Space was beautiful and terrible. He floated next to the ship, attached by a single cable, working on machinery that was never meant to exist. Katie had done her best, but this was equipment built from pieces that didn't fit together. He spent 4 hours in the freezing vacuum, rerouting power and replacing burned circuits. When he climbed back inside, his hands shook so badly he could barely remove his helmet. The drive held. The ship continued. Jacob added external repairs to his routine. He talked to himself to stay sane. Full conversations with people who weren't there. He told Katie about the drive problems and how he fixed them. He told Peter about his health, how his body was adapting to the long time in low gravity. He told Lisa about his plans, how he would approach the throne room, what words he would say. The empty ship listened to it all and said nothing back. By day 40, he had memorized the entire Xanthir legal code. The right of answer was buried deep in their oldest laws. It came from a time when the Xanthir actually believed in justice, when they thought every species deserved to speak before judgment. That time was long gone, but the law remained. It said clearly that any species facing elimination could send one voice to speak before the supreme arbiter. The arbiter had to listen until the speaker finished or chose to stop. Only then could judgment be carried out. Jacob practiced his speech every day. He spoke it in Xanthir, making sure every word was correct. The language was difficult, full of subtle sounds that humans weren't built to make. But he practiced until his throat hurt, until the words came naturally. He would speak for humanity, and he would speak perfectly. They would not dismiss him because of poor grammar. On day 61, the water recycler broke. Jacob woke up to find the tank empty and the system dead. He had 3 days of emergency water, maybe 4 if he was careful. After that, he would die of thirst in a metal box traveling between stars. He spent 18 hours taking the recycler apart piece by piece, finding the broken valve, fabricating a replacement from parts of the food heater. The fix was ugly, but it worked. He refilled the tank and added water system maintenance to his routine. The ship became his entire world. He knew every panel, every wire, every weak point. He patched and repaired and prayed to gods he didn't believe in. The shuttle held together through luck and desperation. Katie's engineering was brilliant, but even genius couldn't make broken parts whole. The ship was dying slowly, same as Jacob. The question was whether it would last long enough. Day 90 brought the second drive failure. This one was worse. Something in the core had cracked, leaking radiation into the engine compartment. Jacob couldn't fix it from outside. He had to go into a space filled with enough radiation to kill him in hours. He took every anti-radiation medicine Peter had given him, put on every piece of protective gear, and crawled into the engine compartment. The heat was incredible. The radiation meter on his suit screamed warnings. He ignored it all and worked. His hands moved on instinct, sealing the crack with repair gel, rerouting the power flow, stabilizing the core. When he finally crawled out 3 hours later, his suit's radiation meter had maxed out. He had absorbed enough radiation to get sick, maybe die. But the drive was working. The ship continued. He spent the next week vomiting and weak, barely able to eat. His body fought the radiation damage while the ship flew on. Peter's medicines helped. His young, strong body helped more. By day 100, he was recovering. By day 110, he was back to his routine. The radiation had aged him, but he would live long enough to reach Xanthir Prime. Jacob watched himself change in the small mirror. His face was thinner, harder. His eyes had a distance in them that hadn't been there before. He looked like a man who had already died and was just waiting for his body to catch up. Maybe that was true. Maybe he had died when Earth burned. This was just the ghost of Jacob Hayes traveling through space on momentum and will. On day 120, he crossed into Xanthir-controlled space. The navigation computer showed sensor nets and patrol routes. The Empire was vast, spreading across hundreds of systems. Every world was watched, every ship tracked. It would be impossible to sneak through. Fortunately, Jacob wasn't trying to sneak. He was already dead. Humanity was extinct. The Xanthir had declared it, made it official. They weren't looking for human ships because there were no human ships to look for. Jacob's shuttle was so small, so poorly built, that their sensors would barely register it. They would see a piece of space junk, some debris floating between systems. By the time they realized what it was, he would be too deep in their territory to stop. The final month passed in a blur of tension. Every day he expected to be detected, blown apart by some automated defense. But the ship continued, slipping through gaps in their sensor coverage, appearing as nothing important on their displays. The Xanthir had grown comfortable. They owned this space. Nothing here could threaten them. On day 132, Jacob saw Xanthir Prime for the first time. The planet appeared on his sensors as a blue and green world orbiting a white star. Cities covered the surface, massive structures that dwarfed anything humanity had built. Orbital platforms ringed the planet like a mechanical crown. Thousands of ships moved between them, going about their business. This was the heart of the empire that destroyed his species. This was where he would speak. Jacob put on his uniform one last time. He checked every seal, every system. The shuttle was falling apart, held together by repairs and hope, but it would last a little longer. Just long enough. He set course for the planet's surface, aimed at the capital city. The navigation computer showed the Tower of Judgment, the massive building where the Supreme Arbiter ruled. That was his target. He took a deep breath and began his descent. Alarms started immediately. The Xanthir had finally noticed him. Ships moved to intercept. Weapons locked onto his position. Jacob ignored them all. He pushed the dying shuttle faster, harder, breaking through the atmosphere in a ball of fire. The hull screamed. The controls shook in his hands. He held course. The Imperial Plaza appeared below him, a massive open space in front of the Tower of Judgment. Jacob aimed for the center. The shuttle hit the ground at over 300 kilometers per hour, tearing a trench through gardens and walkways. Metal shrieked. Systems exploded. The world became noise and violence. Then suddenly, silence. Jacob sat in the ruined cockpit, breathing hard. He was alive. The crash should have killed him, but Katie's reinforced hull had held just enough. He unbuckled his harness and stood on shaking legs. Through the cracked windshield, he could see Xanthir civilians running, screaming. Guards were already moving toward the crash. He opened the emergency hatch and stepped out into alien sunlight. The air smelled wrong, felt wrong. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth's, but Jacob stood straight, wearing the uniform of a dead species. He began walking toward the Tower of Judgment. Behind him, the shuttle burned. Ahead of him, an empire waited. The first Xanthir to reach him froze in place, staring like Jacob was a ghost. The alien stood nearly 2 meters tall, covered in scales that shifted between blue and purple. 4 eyes blinked in sequence, trying to process what they were seeing. Behind the alien, others stopped and stared. A human, alive, impossible. Jacob kept walking. His legs were steady despite the crash, despite the months alone in space. He had come too far to hesitate now. Each step toward the Tower of Judgment was measured, deliberate. He could feel thousands of eyes on him. Xanthir civilians backed away, some screaming, others just frozen in shock. They had been told humanity was extinct. The announcement had been broadcast across the empire. Yet here walked a human in military dress crossing their most sacred plaza. The security drones arrived next, floating machines bristling with weapons. They surrounded Jacob in a perfect circle, targeting lasers painting red dots across his chest. Still, he walked. The drones didn't fire. Their programming didn't know what to do. He wasn't attacking. He wasn't running. He was just walking toward the tower like he had every right to be there. Then came the elite guard. 20 soldiers in ceremonial armor that doubled as combat suits, armed with weapons that could level buildings. They formed a wall between Jacob and the tower entrance. Their leader stepped forward, and Jacob recognized the rank insignia from his studies. This was a high commander, someone trusted to protect the Supreme Arbiter herself. The commander's name badge read Vexthal. He was older than the other guards, his scales showing the gray that came with age. His 4 eyes studied Jacob with an intensity that was almost physical. When he spoke, his voice was deep and carried across the plaza. "This is impossible. Humans are extinct. We eliminated your species 3 months ago. You cannot be here." Jacob stopped 5 meters from the commander. He stood straight, military posture, and spoke in perfect high Xanthir. "I am Commander Jacob Hayes of the human species. I invoke the right of answer, ancient law of the Xanthir Empire. I claim the right to speak before Supreme Arbiter Kathira, before final judgment is rendered upon my people." The plaza went absolutely silent. Even the drones seemed to pause. Vextal's eyes widened slightly, the only sign of his shock. The right of answer. Jacob had spoken the formal words, pronounced them perfectly. It was a law so old that most Xanthir forgot it existed, buried deep in their legal codes from a time when their empire was young. "You dare invoke ancient law," Vextal said slowly. "You dare claim protection under traditions you cannot possibly understand?" "I understand them perfectly," Jacob replied. "I have studied your laws, your culture, your history. The right of answer is clear. Any species facing elimination may send one representative to speak before the Supreme Arbiter. I am that representative. I am here to speak for the 30 billion humans you murdered. Murmurs spread through the crowd of Xanthir civilians. Many pulled out communication devices recording the confrontation. This was unprecedented. A member of an extinct species invoking forgotten laws. It would spread across the Empire in minutes. Vextal understood this. He understood that every word spoken here was being heard by thousands, soon to be millions. Even if the law is real, Vextal said, you have no proof of your identity. You could be anyone, anything. How do we know you are truly human? Jacob held out his arm. Test me. Your genetic scanners can confirm my species in seconds. Vextal hesitated, then signaled to one of his soldiers. The guard approached with a handheld scanner pointing it at Jacob. The device hummed, analyzing his DNA, his cellular structure, his genetic markers. After a moment, it beeped. The guard looked at the display, then at Vextal, then back at the display as if it might change. Commander, the guard said quietly, it's confirmed. He is human. Pure genetic match. No modifications, no tricks. He is what he claims to be. The plaza erupted in noise. Xanthir civilians shouting, some in fear, others in confusion. How could a human be here? The extinction had been complete, total. Every world checked, every colony eliminated. There should be no survivors. Yet here stood living proof that the Empire's declaration was wrong. Vextal raised a hand and the crowd quieted. He looked at Jacob with something that might have been respect. The right of answer is sacred law. I cannot deny your claim, not here, not in front of my people. But know this, human, once you enter that tower, you will not leave alive. The Supreme Arbiter may allow you to speak, but she will also allow your execution. You are walking to your death. I know, Jacob said simply. I have known since I left my station. But death with purpose is better than silence. My species will be heard even if I must be the last voice they have. Vextal studied him for a long moment. Then he gave a slight nod, a gesture of acknowledgement between warriors. Very well. I will escort you to the throne room. Follow me and do not deviate from the path. If you attempt to flee or attack, my guards will kill you instantly. I'm not here to run or fight, Jacob said. I'm here to speak. The tower entrance was massive, doors carved from some dark stone that seemed to absorb light. They opened as Vextal approached, revealing a hallway that stretched impossibly far. The walls were covered in crystals, each one from a different conquered world. Jacob recognized some of them from his studies. That blue one was from the Kelthani homeworld, subjugated 200 years ago. The red crystal came from the Drath system, conquered and absorbed 50 years before. Each crystal represented a species that had lost their freedom to the Xanthir Empire. Jacob wondered if they would add a crystal for humanity. Something to remember Earth, to mark the extinction of his people. The thought made him angry, but he kept his face calm. Anger wouldn't help him now. He needed to be clear, focused, perfect. They walked through corridors filled with more guards, more officials. Everyone stopped to stare at the human being escorted through their most sacred building. Some looked afraid. Others looked curious. A few looked angry, as if Jacob's mere existence was an insult to their empire's power. He ignored them all, keeping his eyes forward, his steps steady. Vextal led him to a large chamber with doors made of what looked like gold. Beyond these doors is the throne room. The Supreme Arbiter is in session with her High Council. I will announce your presence and your claim. What happens next is between you and her. Thank you, Jacob said. He meant it. Vextal could have killed him in the plaza, could have declared the right of answer void. But the commander had honored the old law even for an enemy. The golden doors opened. The throne room beyond was vast, a space that could hold thousands. But today it held only the most powerful members of the Xanthir Empire. At the far end, sitting on a throne carved from white stone, was Supreme Arbiter Kathira. She was ancient, her scales faded to almost silver with age. But her eyes were sharp, intelligent, missing nothing. Around her stood the High Council, military commanders in decorated armor, territorial governors in formal robes, and others whose roles Jacob couldn't identify. They all turned as he entered, and the room fell silent. Vextal's voice echoed through the chamber. Supreme Arbiter, I present Commander Jacob Hayes. He claims to be human and invokes the right of answer under ancient law. Genetic testing confirms his species. He requests permission to speak before this council. Kathira leaned forward slightly. her 4 eyes focusing on Jacob with an intensity that felt like being crushed. When she spoke, her voice was powerful despite her age, filling the room with authority. A human. We declared your species extinct 3 months ago. Our ships burned every world you possessed. Our forces eliminated every colony we could find. How do you stand before me alive? Jacob stepped forward, and immediately guards moved to intercept. But Kathira raised one hand and they stopped. She gestured for Jacob to continue. He stopped in the center of the room, directly before the throne, and spoke. I survived because I was forgotten. I served on a mining station too small to matter. Your forces didn't bother eliminating us because we posed no threat. We were beneath your notice, so we lived and watched as you destroyed everything we loved. And now you come here, Kathira said. To what purpose? Do you seek mercy? Do you beg us to spare what remains of your species? No, Jacob said firmly. I come to invoke an ancient right. I come to speak for those who can no longer speak for themselves. The right of answer grants me this. You cannot deny it without breaking your own laws, without admitting that your traditions are meaningless. A tall Xanthir in dark robes stepped forward from the council. The right of answer is for species facing judgment, not species already judged. You are too late, human. The sentence has been carried out. Jacob had prepared for this argument. The law says the right exists until final judgment. You declared us extinct, but extinction is not complete while even one member survives. I stand here alive. Therefore humanity still exists. Therefore I have the right to speak. The room erupted in arguments. Council members shouted at each other, some agreeing with Jacob's interpretation, others calling it a mockery of law. Through it all, Kathira sat silent, watching Jacob with those sharp eyes. Finally, she raised her hand again and the room quieted instantly. The human's logic is sound, she said. Twisted perhaps, but sound. While he lives, humanity is not extinct. Therefore the right of answer applies. Jacob stood in the center of the throne room, surrounded by the leaders of the empire that had destroyed his species. He had rehearsed this moment for 4 months, spoken these words to empty walls and silent space. But now, facing the actual weight of their eyes, their judgment, their power, he felt the enormity of what he was attempting. He was one man speaking for 30 billion dead. How could any words be enough? He began simply, his voice clear and steady. My name is Commander Jacob Hayes. I am 42 years old. I was born on Earth, in a city called Seattle. I had a sister named Michelle. She was a teacher. She loved children, spent her life helping them learn. She died when your ships burned our homeworld. She was holding her students, trying to protect them as the fire came. She was 38 years old. The room was silent. Jacob continued. I had a friend named Danny Clark. He was a pilot, one of the best humanity ever produced. He could fly anything, fix anything. He had a wife and 2 daughters. They lived on Mars colony. Your forces destroyed the colony in the 2nd week of the war. Danny tried to evacuate civilians. His ship was shot down. He was 45 years old. His daughters were 7 and 9. Kathira watched him without expression. The council members shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't what they expected. They thought he would beg or threaten or make grand speeches about justice. Instead, he was giving them names, making the dead real. On Europa Station, there was a doctor named Helen Price. She saved my life once, removed a tumor that would have killed me. She was brilliant, kind, always working to help others. She died treating patients when your bombs hit the station. She was 62 years old. On the farming world of New Dublin, there was a family named the Coopers. Frank and Linda and their 4 children. They grew food that fed millions. Your ships turned their farm to ash. Frank was 51. Linda was 49. Their children were 14, 12, 8, and 5. Jacob walked slowly as he spoke, his eyes moving across the council members. I can't tell you about all 30 billion. I don't know all their names, but I know they lived. I know they dreamed and loved and built things. They were teachers and farmers and pilots and doctors. They were children who would never grow up. They were old people who survived wars and diseases and hard times, only to die in your fire. The tall Xanthir in dark robes, the one who had argued against Jacob's right to speak, stepped forward. This is pointless sentimentality. Every species has individuals. Every war has casualties. What makes your people special? Why should we care about your dead when you clearly didn't care about ours? Jacob stopped and looked at him directly. You're dead. What dead? We never attacked you. We never declared war on the Xanthir Empire. We were expanding into unclaimed space, building colonies, exploring. Your empire appeared in our skies without warning and started killing us. Where are your casualties? Where are your victims? You committed genocide against a species that never threatened you. You expanded into claimed territory, the robed Xanthir said coldly. The sectors you colonized belonged to the Empire by ancient right. You were warned to leave. You refused. You forced our hand. Warned? Jacob's voice rose for the first time, anger breaking through his control. You sent one message delivered in broken standard language. You gave us 72 hours to evacuate colonies that held billions of people. That's not a warning. That's an excuse. You wanted to eliminate us. The territory claim was just justification. Kathira raised her hand, silencing the argument. Let him continue. You invoked the right of answer, Commander Hayes. Answer the question. Why should we care about your dead? Jacob took a breath, pushing down the anger. Because they were people. Because every life has value. Because when you killed them, you didn't just end their existence. You ended everything they would have created, everything they would have built, every child they would have raised. You erased not just 30 billion lives, but all the lives that would have come from them. Hundreds of billions, trillions eventually. You didn't just commit genocide. You committed the murder of potential itself. He paused, letting the words sink in. But you don't care about that. You're a conquering empire. You've destroyed other species before. What's one more? The real question isn't why you should care. The real question is what it says about you that you don't. A military commander in silver armor spoke up. We eliminated your species because you were dangerous. Human expansion was aggressive, rapid. You spread like a plague across systems. If we had allowed you to continue, you would have eventually threatened the empire itself. We acted in self-defense. Jacob laughed, a bitter sound. Self-defense? You command an empire of 47 conquered species. You control thousands of star systems. Humanity had 12 colonies and one homeworld. We had no weapons that could challenge you, no military that could threaten your borders. We were infants compared to your power. And you were so terrified of us that you had to wipe us out completely? Yes, the military commander said flatly, because we saw what you were becoming. Your technology advanced too quickly. Your population grew too fast. Your ambition knew no limits. In another 100 years, you would have been unstoppable. We eliminated the threat before it could mature. You murdered us because we had potential, Jacob said. Because we might have become something great. You saw a young species full of hope and possibility, and you burned it all away because you were afraid we might surpass you. Kathira leaned forward on her throne. And would you not have done the same, Commander Hayes? If you had seen a species that threatened humanity's survival, would you not have acted to protect your own people? Jacob met her eyes. I don't know. Maybe. But I would like to think we would have tried other options first. Communication. Negotiation, boundaries and treaties. War would have been the last choice, not the first. And if we did have to fight, we would have fought with honor. We wouldn't have bombed schools and hospitals. We wouldn't have targeted civilians. We wouldn't have tried to erase you from existence. Honor, the robed Xanthir said mockingly. The luxury of the weak. The empire survives because we are practical, not honorable. We do what is necessary. No. Jacob said quietly. You do what is easy. Honor is hard. Mercy is hard. Seeing the value in other species is hard. Burning worlds from orbit is easy. Any species with big enough weapons can commit genocide. It takes no skill, no intelligence, no strength, just cruelty and fear. The throne room erupted in angry voices. Several council members shouted at Jacob, calling him arrogant, ignorant, insulting. Guards moved closer, hands on weapons. But Kathira raised both hands, and the room fell silent again. She stood from her throne, and despite her age, she moved with grace and power. She walked down the steps toward Jacob, closing the distance between them. When she stopped, she was only a few meters away. Jacob could see the age in her eyes, the weight of 70 years of absolute rule. She studied him like a scientist studies a specimen. "You are brave, Commander Hayes. Foolish but brave. You came here knowing you would die. You invoked ancient law knowing it would only buy you minutes. You speak for your dead knowing your words will change nothing. Why? What do you hope to accomplish?" Jacob looked at her. "This ancient being who had ordered his species destroyed. I accomplish remembrance. When I die, when you execute me as you surely will, the memory of this moment will spread. Your people heard me. They heard the names of my dead. They heard me call your actions what they truly are. Murder. Genocide. The destruction of an entire species out of fear and convenience. And you think that matters?" Kathira asked. "You think anyone will care?" "Some will," Jacob said. "Maybe not today, maybe not for years. But some will remember that humanity existed, that we mattered enough for one of us to stand in this room and speak truth to power. Even if it changes nothing, even if your empire continues for another 1,000 years, someone will remember. And remembrance is its own kind of immortality." Kathira was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost tired. "You speak as if we don't understand loss, as if we don't know the cost of what we do. Do you think we enjoy eliminating species? Do you think it brings us pleasure?" "I think you do it anyway," Jacob said. "Which is worse. If you enjoyed it, you would be monsters. But you don't enjoy it. You do it coldly, efficiently, because it's convenient for your empire. You've turned genocide into a tool of policy. That's not monstrous. That's something far more terrible. That's evil with a bureaucracy." The room was absolutely silent now. Jacob had crossed a line, called the Supreme Arbiter and her council evil to their faces. The guards waited for the order to kill him. The council members watched to see how Kathira would react. She could end this now with a word. Jacob stood ready, knowing he had said what he came to say. But Kathira surprised him. She smiled, a small, sad expression that looked wrong on her alien features. "Evil with a bureaucracy. Yes, that's exactly what we've become. Do you know what the worst part is, Commander Hayes? You're not even the first to tell us this. Other species have said the same before we eliminated them. We've heard the accusations, the condemnations, the pleading, and we continue anyway because the alternative is admitting that our entire empire is built on atrocity." The throne room remained silent after Kathira's confession. The council members looked uncomfortable, some angry, others thoughtful. The robed Xanthir, who had argued against Jacob earlier, stepped forward, his voice sharp with fury. "Supreme Arbiter, you speak too freely. This human came here to accuse us, and now you confirm his accusations. You admit weakness to our enemy?" Kathira looked at him coldly. "He is not our enemy, Seknar. He is the last witness of a dead species, and I'm tired of pretending our actions are justified. I have ruled for 70 years. I have ordered the subjugation of 6 species and the elimination of 2. I have done these things in the name of the Empire, following the path of my predecessors. But unlike them, I have reached an age where I question whether power and survival are worth the cost of our souls." Seknar's scales rippled with anger. "This is weakness. This is exactly why the Council urged caution about your continued rule. You have grown soft in your age." "No," Kathira said. "I have grown honest. There is a difference." She turned back to Jacob. "You asked why you should care that we don't mourn your dead. Let me ask you something in return. If I gave you a weapon right now, powerful enough to destroy this planet, would you use it? Would you commit genocide against us in revenge for what we did to humanity?" Jacob didn't hesitate. "Yes, without question. If I could end your species to balance the scales, I would do it." Several council members reached for weapons, but Kathira waved them back. "At least you're honest. Tell me why." "Because 30 billion people deserve justice," Jacob said. "Because the universe should know that humanity's death carried a price. Because if I don't make you pay, then our extinction means nothing. We become just another footnote in your empire's history, another species that existed and then didn't. I won't accept that. Even though revenge wouldn't bring them back? Kathira asked. Even though killing us would make you exactly what you accuse us of being? Yes, Jacob said simply. I would become a monster to punish monsters. I would sacrifice my own soul to make sure yours burned too. That's what you've created by murdering my species. You've turned a reasonable man into someone who would gladly commit genocide. That's your legacy. Kathira nodded slowly. That is our legacy. The cycle of violence and revenge repeated across centuries. We destroy species who might threaten us. Survivors seek revenge. We destroy them too. On and on until the galaxy is filled with nothing but ruins and regrets. She stood again and walked toward Jacob. This time she came close enough that he could see the patterns in her scales, the signs of age and wear. What if I offered you something different, Commander Hayes? What if instead of executing you, I gave you what you truly want? Not revenge, but remembrance. Not justice, but truth. What do you mean? Jacob asked carefully. Kathira gestured to the council members. Among these leaders are those who ordered your extinction. Seknar commanded the voice of purification, the division responsible for eliminating species. Admiral Tevkron directed the military assault. Governor Zethnal claimed your colony worlds after they were cleansed. They made the decisions. They carried out the genocide. I approved it, but they executed it. She pulled a small data crystal from her robes. This contains everything. Every order given, every ship deployed, every colony targeted. The complete record of humanity's extinction, documented with typical Xanthir efficiency, names, dates, locations, casualties. Everything your species would need to know exactly what happened and who was responsible. Jacob stared at the crystal. Why would you give me this? Because I am dying, Kathira said flatly. My body is failing. In 6 months, perhaps less, I will be dead. The Council will choose a new Supreme Arbiter, and the Empire will continue as it always has. But before I die, I want one thing. I want the truth to be known. I want the galaxy to see what the Xanthir Empire really is. And I want my successor to inherit an empire that can no longer hide behind lies. Seknar exploded in rage. This is treason. You cannot give classified military intelligence to an enemy. The Council will never allow this. The Council serves at my pleasure, Kathira said. Until I die or they successfully challenge my rule, I am the supreme authority. And I say this human will have the truth he came for. The military commander, Admiral Tevkron, stepped forward. He was younger than Seknar, his scales still bright with color. Supreme Arbiter, think carefully. If this information spreads, it will damage the Empire's reputation. Subject species may rebel. Rival powers may see us as weak. You risk everything our ancestors built. Our ancestors built an empire on the bones of innocence, Kathira said. Perhaps it's time that empire fell. Perhaps the galaxy would be better served by our decline than our dominance. She pressed the crystal into Jacob's hand. It was warm from being against her body, small enough to fit in his palm. Inside was the complete truth of his species' death. He closed his fingers around it, feeling the weight of what she had given him. What do you expect me to do with this? He asked. Survive, Kathira said. Return to wherever you came from. Broadcast this information across the galaxy. Let every species know what we did and why. Let our victims have names and stories. Let the Xanthir Empire be remembered not for our strength but for our cruelty. That is the only justice I can give you. Jacob looked at her suspiciously. You're just going to let me leave? After everything I said, after accusing you of genocide, you're going to give me the evidence and let me walk out? No, Kathira said. I'm not letting you walk out. That would be too obvious, too easy. The Council would stop you before you reached your ship. Instead, I'm going to do something else. She turned to Vexthal, who had been standing quietly at the edge of the room. Commander Vexthal, this human has completed his right of answer. He has spoken for his species. Under ancient law, what happens now? Vexthal looked uncomfortable. Ancient law states that after the right of answer is fulfilled, the speaker may request one of 3 things. Mercy for their species, trial by combat for their freedom, or the right to die by their own hand rather than execution. And if the species is already extinct, Kathira asked. If mercy is impossible, then the other 2 options remain, Vexthal said slowly, understanding what she was doing. Trial by combat or chosen death. Kathira looked at Jacob. Commander Hayes, you have spoken for humanity. You have fulfilled the right of answer. Now you must choose. Trial by combat, where you fight for your freedom against a champion of my choosing, or death by your own hand, quick and painless on your own terms. Which do you choose? Jacob understood immediately. She was giving him a chance. Trial by combat meant a fight, and fights could be escaped. It was a slim hope, but it was something. He looked at Vexthal, seeing the understanding in the commander's eyes. The old warrior knew what Kathira was doing too. "I choose trial by combat," Jacob said. Seknar protested immediately. "This is absurd. Trial by combat is for warriors, not for genocidal planning. You cannot bend the law this way." "I am not bending the law," Kathira said calmly. "I am following it exactly. The right of answer is ancient and sacred. All its provisions must be honored. Commander Hayes has chosen combat. I will now choose his opponent." She looked at Vexithal again. "Commander, you are my finest warrior. You will face the human in combat. The arena will be the Imperial Plaza. The fight will be tomorrow at dawn. If Commander Hayes wins, he goes free. If you win, he dies. Those are the terms." Vexthal bowed deeply. "I accept, Supreme Arbiter." Jacob felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. He had no weapons, no armor, and he would be fighting an elite Xanthir warrior in front of thousands of witnesses, but he would be outside the tower in the open, with his ship somewhere nearby. If he could survive the fight long enough, if he could find a way to escape, he might actually make it off this planet alive. Guards escorted him from the throne room. As he left, he glanced back at Kathira. The ancient ruler watched him go with an expression he couldn't read. Was she helping him? Or was this just another game, another way for the Empire to demonstrate its power? He didn't know. But he had the crystal in his pocket, and he had a chance at freedom. That was more than he had hoped for when he crashed in the plaza. They put him in a cell beneath the tower. It was clean, almost comfortable, with a sleeping platform and basic facilities. A guard brought him food and water. Jacob ate mechanically, his mind racing through possibilities. He needed a plan. He needed to figure out how to survive a fight against a trained warrior while simultaneously finding a way to his ship. Hours passed. Night fell on Xanthir Prime, visible through a small window high in the cell wall. Jacob lay on the sleeping platform, exhausted but unable to rest. Tomorrow he would fight for his life. Tomorrow he would either die in the arena or escape to bring the truth about humanity's extinction to the galaxy. Either way, his journey was almost over. As he finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, his hand stayed in his pocket, fingers wrapped around the data crystal. The truth of 30 billion deaths contained in a piece of technology smaller than his thumb. If he could just survive long enough to share it, his species would be remembered. That was all he had left to fight for. That was everything. In the throne room high above, Kathira stood at a window overlooking the plaza. She could see the wreckage. Dawn came slowly to Xanthir Prime. The blue-white star rose over the capital city, casting long shadows across the Imperial Plaza. Jacob stood in his cell, watching the light spread through the small window. This was possibly his last sunrise. He tried to appreciate it, to memorize the way the alien sunlight looked on the alien architecture. If he died today, at least he would die having seen something no other human had ever witnessed. Guards came for him an hour after sunrise. They didn't bind his hands or threaten him. There was no need. Where could he run? He was in the heart of the Empire's capital, surrounded by millions of Xanthir. Even if he somehow escaped the arena, he would be hunted down within minutes. The guards simply escorted him through corridors and upstairs, treating him almost respectfully. Perhaps Vexthal had told them about the ancient law, about the right of answer. Perhaps they saw Jacob differently now, not as a criminal but as a warrior facing an honorable death. The plaza was already crowded when they emerged. Thousands of Xanthir civilians filled the space, held back by barriers that created a large circle in the center. Floating cameras drifted overhead, broadcasting the event across the planet and beyond. Jacob saw his crashed shuttle on the edge of the plaza, still damaged but no longer smoking. Guards stood around it, preventing anyone from approaching. He marked its location, calculating distances and paths. If he got the chance to run, that was his only hope. Vexthal waited in the center of the circle. The commander had removed his ceremonial armor, wearing instead a simple combat suit that allowed full movement. In his hands he held a staff weapon, traditional Xanthir combat equipment that could extend blades from both ends. He looked relaxed, confident. This was what he trained for his entire life. Killing was his profession. A platform had been erected at one end of the circle. On it sat Kathira and her High Council, watching from elevated seats. The Supreme Arbiter looked tired in the morning light, her age showing more clearly. But her eyes were alert, missing nothing. Next to her, Seknar watched with barely concealed anger. The other council members showed various expressions, from curiosity to contempt. They had come to watch the last human die. Jacob was led to the circle's center. A guard offered him a weapon, a simple metal staff without the blade attachments. It was better than nothing, but not much. Jacob took it, feeling the weight, testing the balance. It had been years since he trained in staff combat, and even then he had never been exceptional. Vexthal would kill him easily in a fair fight. Fortunately, Jacob had no intention of fighting fair. Kathira stood, and the crowd fell silent. Her voice carried across the plaza, amplified by speakers. "We gather to witness trial by combat, ancient right granted under the right of answer. Commander Jacob Hayes, last of the human species, has chosen to fight for his freedom. Commander Vexthal, champion of the Xanther Empire, will face him. The rules are simple. Combat continues until one fighter yields or dies. The survivor goes free. Let the trial begin." She sat down. Vexthal activated his weapon, blades extending from both ends of his staff with a sharp metallic sound. The crowd cheered. Jacob held his plain staff and waited. Vexthal approached slowly, professionally. He wasn't showboating or taking unnecessary risks. He would end this quickly and cleanly, giving the human a warrior's death. Jacob backed away, keeping distance, his eyes scanning the area. The barriers holding back the crowd were electronic, force fields that could be deactivated. The guards around his shuttle were armed but focused on the combat. The floating cameras tracked every movement, broadcasting to millions. Vexthal struck, fast and precise. Jacob barely blocked, the impact sending shocks through his arms. The commander was incredibly strong, each blow delivered with perfect form. Jacob retreated, defending desperately. Another strike came, then another. He blocked the first, dodged the second, took a glancing hit from the third that tore through his uniform and cut his shoulder. Blood ran down his arm, red against the dark fabric. The crowd roared approval. Vexthal pressed the attack, driving Jacob backward toward the barriers. The human was outmatched, everyone could see it. This would be over in seconds. But Jacob wasn't trying to win the fight. He was trying to survive long enough to reach his ship. He kept backing toward the shuttle slowly, carefully, making it look like panic rather than strategy. Vexthal saw through it. The commander changed angle, cutting off Jacob's path to the shuttle, forcing him toward the center of the circle. Another exchange of blows, faster now. Jacob's staff cracked under the impact. His arms ached. His shoulder bled freely. He was running out of time. Then Kathira stood up. The movement was unexpected enough that both fighters paused. The Supreme Arbiter looked directly at Seknar and spoke loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Tell me, Voice of Purification, do you still believe humanity's elimination was justified?" Seknar stood, confusion and anger mixing on his face. "Supreme Arbiter, this is not the time for political debate. The combat must continue." "Answer the question," Kathira said coldly. "You ordered the extinction. Do you still believe it was right?" "Of course I do," Seknar said. "Humanity was a threat. We eliminated that threat. It was necessary for the Empire's survival." "And the 30 billion dead?" Kathira asked. "The children, the civilians, the innocents? They were all necessary?" "They were all part of the threat," Seknar replied. "You cannot eliminate a species partially. It must be complete or it is useless." Kathira nodded slowly. Then she did something that shocked everyone present. She pulled out a small device and pressed a button. Instantly, every display screen in the plaza, every floating screen, every broadcast channel, switched from showing the combat to showing documents. Military orders, casualty reports, communications between commanders, the complete record of humanity's extinction, taken from the data crystal she had given Jacob. But she had kept a copy. The crowd went silent, reading the information flowing across the screens. The names of commanders who gave orders, the casualty counts broken down by planet, by city, by age group, the internal communications where Xanthir officials discussed the elimination with cold efficiency. Everything was there, every crime documented in excruciating detail. Seknar screamed in rage. "What have you done? You have betrayed the Empire. You have exposed classified information to the entire planet." "I have exposed the truth," Kathira said calmly. "I am dying, old friend. In my remaining months, I choose to let our people see what we really are. Let them decide if the Empire built on these foundations deserves to continue. The plaza erupted in chaos. Some Xanthir shouted in anger at the revelation. Others stood silent, reading the screens with growing horror. The council members argued furiously among themselves. Guards looked confused, unsure what to do. And in that chaos, Jacob ran. He sprinted toward his shuttle, still holding the cracked staff. Guards moved to intercept but hesitated, unsure if they should prioritize the fighting or the political crisis unfolding on the platform. Vextal started to follow, then stopped. The commander looked at Kathira, understanding finally what she had done. This wasn't about the trial by combat. It was about forcing the Empire to face its crimes in the most public way possible. And she had used both the human and the combat to create this moment. Jacob reached the shuttle. The guards there finally reacted, raising weapons, but he was already inside. The emergency system still worked, barely. He sealed the hatch and powered up the engines. Alarm screamed. The shuttle shook as guards fired on it, but the reinforced hull held. He had seconds before heavier weapons arrived. The engines caught. Jacob pulled up, the damaged shuttle lifting unsteadily from the plaza. He expected missiles, expected to be shot down immediately, but the chaos below had consumed everyone's attention. The political implications of Kathira's revelation were more important than one escaping human. He climbed higher, faster, pushing the dying engines beyond their limits. Through the window, he saw the plaza shrinking below. Xanthir civilians filled the streets, watching the screens, arguing, some fighting each other. The Empire's perfect order was cracking, all because their supreme arbiter had decided truth was more important than power. Jacob felt a strange gratitude toward the dying ruler who had given him both evidence and opportunity. The shuttle broke atmosphere, groaning with stress. Jacob set course away from Xanthir Prime, away from the patrols and defensive stations. Most of the Empire's ships were focused on the capital, drawn by the unfolding crisis. The few that noticed one small shuttle leaving barely reacted. There were more important things happening. Jacob activated the faster-than-light drive. It protested, damaged, and overworked, but it engaged. The stars stretched. The Xanthir homeworld disappeared behind him. He was alive. He was free. And he carried the truth of humanity's extinction in a data crystal in his pocket. The journey back to Persephone's gate took 3 months. The shuttle barely held together, requiring constant repairs. Jacob survived on recycled water and the last of his food supplies. But he was going home. He was bringing proof of what happened to humanity. The mining station would know. And from there, the information would spread. When he finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the asteroid belt, he expected to see the mining station waiting. Instead, he saw something